Hello, my name is Iain McNay. This is Cherry Red TV, and today we're going to have another programme in our series about UK independent labels. And today we're talking to Simon Edwards from Riot City Records. Hello, Simon.
Hi.
And we've already made a programme actually about Heartbeat Records, which was the forerunner in one way to Riot City Records.
Yes,
so just tell us briefly how Riot City Records came about.
Riot City really, it started because there was a burgeoning sort of new wave of punk starting, and towards the end of my Heartbeat Records run, there was a band called Vice Squad in Bristol that I felt, were going to become pretty important in this new wave of punk, and I thought it would be a nice idea to do an EP with them. I brought it up to you in our usual business-like way, and
so I should explain there that we had a license arrangement between us. Heartbeat went through Cherry Red, and so you were like the creative side there, and our side you'd bring tapes to me, and I'd say basically whether I wanted to go with it or not.
Yeah, and we sat down and we listened. We went through the Vice Squad demo, and you weren't really impressed with it.
No, I didn't like it much. No,
and which was, to me, it was a bit. Because you'd always liked what I'd done, and you always thought I had a good ear for things, and I thought, wonder why he doesn't like that. And that actually made me think, and it sort of, I thought, well, what if he doesn't? If he says no to it, what do I do then? Because I want to do it, but because I'd gained experience over the 2 years of running Heartbeat in how to manipulate records and work within the business, I thought, well, maybe I can do it myself. I've got the confidence, I've got the know-how, so give it a go. And so eventually we decided to do it ourselves.
So we was who? Was you and the band?
Well, I say me and the band because at the time Bristol had just undergone some very unpleasant riots.
That's right, yeah.
And there was a lot of...
St Paul's area, wasn't it?
St Paul's area of Bristol, there was a lot of unpleasantness, a lot of media hype, and Bristol was everywhere, all over the world. The riots in Bristol, it was bad, but probably not as bad as people made out. And there were some serious issues to be addressed, and hopefully now they've been addressed. But at the time, it was something that obviously young people in the Bristol area were quite concerned about. And Dave Bateman and Shane Baldwin from Vice Squad had an idea that it would be good to call the label that did their first EP Riot City Records, because it was like an identifier to where they were coming from, and they were singing about all the unrest and the bad things that were going on, and so it was the perfect moniker, really. So we adopted the label Riot City Records,
which is a good name because it's a name you don't forget too.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, that's a very, very difficult thing to find. Is a good name, and we were quite lucky. The idea was that Shane and Dave, because they were involved in the punk movement more than I was regarded as an old man really by the punks in Bristol. But I wanted to be there, and because I had that vehicle and that ability to give them a springboard and help them make records. And so Dave, Shane and I agreed that they would find bands and bring them to me, so as not to, so I didn't have to go out and look for the bands, and we would release them on a rolling release schedule. But at the time, Vice Squad's EP had been released, and I had no idea what was going to happen, because obviously, it was the first release I'd done on my own without the help of yourself. Quite worrying.
So you pressed up just a couple of thousand.
We pressed up. We pressed 1,000 up to start up, because I was very. I've always had a sort of a little mistrust of my own ability in a way, and so I thought, shall I press 5,000 or 1? I said, no, I'll press 1, because if it doesn't sell, I won't lose so much money. So I just pressed 1,000, and at the time, the Rough Trade organisation had a thing called the Cartel, which was a group of shops around the country. It
was a group of distributors, actually.
Yeah, but they were all part of record shops, and the distribution was run from the back of various record shops around the country. and Bristol had one, Revolver Records, and they had a little out room, which isn't that much bigger as this studio really, and that was where the southwestern arm of Rough Trade, stroke the cartel, was run from. And so, and because of Heartbeat, I knew all the guys there. I used to go in there all the time, and so it was easy for me to say, look, I'm doing this on my own. Can you help me? They said, well, yeah, of course we will. Yeah. We'll put it out, to the other shops of Rough Trade, and see what happens. So anyway, I pressed 1,000 copies of the Last Rockers EP by Vice Squad. Took it in there. Within 3 days, they had sold 500 of them, which amazed me. So I gave them the other 500, and by the end of the week, they were gone.
A great start, wasn't it?
That, to me, it was wonderful. I mean, I didn't know what you think. Well, how do I follow that? What do I do? How many do I press next? And the second wave of punk had started, and there were tours going out. Bands like Crongen and The Exploited, and all these bands were out playing, and I thought, well, something's really happening here. Maybe I should press a few more. So I thought, well, I'll be very brave and I'll press 2,000. That's the sort of guy I was, I'm afraid, So I pressed 2,000, and they were gone in another few days. Fortunately, through you, I had good contacts at pressing plants, and I used the same people that you used to use, and then we used to get a good turnaround, and it was quite quick. So I think that went on for about a month, Ian, and we were just pressing up 2,000, 3,000, and they'd be selling within. So in the end, I thought, let's just go for it, and I ended up pressing a 10,000 block of EPs.
Wow!
Because I thought it was heady stuff for me.
And also in those days, there was an independent chart, so you must have been quite high in that.
Yeah, there was. I was going to mention that with all these other bands doing things as well, the independent charts, which were in Record Business magazine. That's right. They obviously showcased all the independent releases in these charts, and my releases were at the top. And so
you were number one in the chart
for a while, and it was just amazing stuff, And which is let's press 10,000 of these and see what happens. And there are other labels, punk labels, around at the same time. You've got an affiliate with No Future Records, and they were releasing stuff as well that was selling really well.
They had Blitz, which went to number one too.
That's right. And we were doing gigs with all these bands and seeing each other. One week we'd be there, and next week they would be there, and it was just a really exciting time. Something that I never thought would happen, but when it does happen, you just go with it, and it's just a lot of fun.
So it took off in a far bigger way than Heartbeat Records did.
Absolutely, a completely different kettle of fish altogether. With Heartbeat, I didn't really want to get involved with the touring side and the merchandising side, because obviously there wasn't the demand, shall we say. But with Riot City and the new wave of punk, there was such a demand for going on tour, T-shirts and the rest of it, handkerchiefs, badges, posters, that I got into all that as well, which something where
so this became a full-time thing for you?
No, it didn't. No,
you did it in your part-time?
Through all this time, I've had a daytime job, and through Heartbeat Records, I used to work for the AA, and it was quite easy to do the two things with Heartbeat because it was reasonably laid back. But with Riot City, it just came right in my face, and I had to make a few tough decisions about whether I stay in my day job, do this full time. But going back to me being a bit of an overcautious sort of bloke, I decided to stick with my day job, but talk to my boss and say, look, I'm doing this. This is happening. Can I have some unpaid leave, please? So I got a load of unpaid leave to go on tour with Vice Squad and do all the work that I had to do. And I was basically driving the band around and running the merchandising stand, as well as selling all these EPs, and it was just fabulous time, absolutely fabulous. And
so you signed some other bands, Insane, Abrasive Wheels, Court Martial.
Yeah, like I said before, with Dave and Shane, we had agreed that they would come to me with bands that they thought should be on the label, and they came with a couple, but shortly after their first EP was released, they were on tour, they were so busy themselves, they didn't have time to think about the label. So I ended up really just putting bands on that I felt were worthy of being put on.
And they were all local bands again, were they?
No. I mean, it did start out as local bands. The first two releases were Vice Squad EPs. There was the Last Rockers EP and the Resurrection EP. The first band that we put on was a band from Bristol called Court Martial. There was also a band called Chaos UK that came from Bristol. There was a band called Disorder. But when Riot City was in the independent charts, we started getting floods of demo tapes from bands all around the country, and in fact all over the world. But there's only so many hours in a day, and you think, wouldn't it be great to do all this? But you can't, because you just can't do it. So you have to be very selective. And I was aware of a band called the Abrasive Wheels from Leeds. I really liked them. And they had already done their own single on their own label, and I thought it'd be nice to get those on Riot City. They wanted to come on Riot City, so we signed, and went from there. And they were my first album on Riot City. Vice Squad did record an album, but Vice Squad recorded it for EMI, because all the excitement surrounding Vice Squad, who had Becky as the lead singer, and so she was a really good front person. So
So what happened there? So EMI kind of poached them for you in one way, did they?
Well, yeah, they. Like I say, we did 2 EPs, and because of the tours we were doing, I ended up doing a 12-inch version of the 2 EPs, 1 EP on either side. But from the 2 EPs, from that interest, EMI wanted to sign the band, and they sent down their A&R guys, and and then Vice Squad got a manager, and it all got a bit business-like, well, a bit too business-like for my liking. And when they eventually signed with EMI, and they were commissioned to record an album, I was pushed away, and I wasn't allowed to have any say in how the album was recorded, and it was recorded away from where I would have recorded it.
And how was that for you?
Bad. I just felt I didn't, I felt that it wasn't how I wanted it to go. I suppose I felt Vice Squad were partly my.
And you were the architects in one way of helping to mould their career.
But I wasn't naive I wasn't naive not to realise that people wanted to get on, they wanted to succeed, and and maybe I couldn't be part of the EMI thing, but I just wish I'd had more say in the recording of the album, because there's that, going back to the independent label ethos again. When you do it yourself, and you've got the time to sort of make it sound the way you want it to sound, and you're the end result as well. You say, well, yeah, that sounds great. That's exactly how I want it to sound, and you're happy with it. 2 occasions I can think of now. One with Vice Squad, and one with my European single on Heartbeat, was when the band signed to a major label, and they re-recorded the songs. They never ever captured the energy and the excitement that was on those original recordings, and that saddens me in a way, that those original recordings weren't the ones that were used and built on, really.
So did actually Vice Squad sell more records than EMI? Were they more successful, do you think?
I may be wrong when I say, I'm pretty sure I'm not wrong, but I did sell more Vice Squad records than EMI did. From the publishing returns I used to get from EMI, I did.
Because you kept the involvement in their publishing.
I did, yeah. So yes, I like to think that I did sell more Vice Squad records than EMI did, and it was, it's in a way it's an indictment of major labels obviously wanted to get in on the scene and have their own punk band and do this and do that, but then it doesn't necessarily mean they can sell it to the right people.
They haven't actually got the right distribution network.
Exactly.
They've got a superior one when things really take off.
Yes.
But getting in the grassroots places.
That groundswell of interest has to be got from down there. And
So did you have like a plan of where Riot City was going? You were saying earlier you were starting to get demo tapes from all over the country. You signed Abrasive Wheels, who were based in Leeds. Were you thinking, I'm going to go this direction with the label?
Well,
was it all an organic thing that happened on its own more?
Well, it was a little bit of both, really. And I mean, I wasn't naive enough to think that we could continue this with Bristol bands, because there weren't enough of them that were good enough to be on the label. No, you see, because once you, as you probably know from your label, once you get to those heights in the charts, it sets a sort of a level of expectation in a way from your next releases, because you want to try and maintain that level of interest within the label. So there were a couple of good bands from Bristol, Kosher Cane Disorder, but not quite. After that, there weren't so many bands that I thought could do it. So yes, I did tend to start looking further afield, and ended up signing bands like The Ejected from Dagenham, London, who were a great band, and they were, you know, great fun to work with. So yeah, I think, you know, we tended to start to look away from our own roots in Bristol. You had to, really, to survive.
So you're a national label based in Bristol, which is quite unusual.
It is, yeah. So we had a couple of bands from Leeds, band from Manchester, band from the Wirral. So we did spread our feelers around a bit.
So you actually ended up releasing 32 singles.
Staggering.
Must have been over, what, a 3-year period, was it?
Yeah.
So you were really going for it during that time.
Well, like I said, there was such a lot going on.
Yeah.
And there was this new wave of punk happening, and I just wanted to try and get as much in there as I could. And it's quite an exhausting time, to be honest.
With a day job as well, absolutely.
Well, there was a few dodgy times at the day job, but and a few sort of, I collapsed from exhaustion one day, because because I loved it so much, because I was such a fan all the time, I would think nothing of doing a day's work, finishing work at 4 o'clock, driving the band up to Sheffield for a gig, coming back, getting home at 3 in the morning, going to work at 8 the next day, finishing at 3, driving up to Liverpool. This is how it was, you know. And it was only later on when we started doing the bigger tours, and we actually got our own truck, and we went around, and, you know. But being on tour with Vice Squad was another highlight of my life. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And
they were all characters, weren't they? Yeah.
Well, they were all characters, and so were all the people that came to the gigs.
Yeah.
I never had any problem. I mean, the merchandise desk was overrun at times by kids, you know, but it was just a wonderful time to be involved in music, and they all wanted to be part of it. We did the big festivals like Christmas on Earth up in Leeds, where Black Flag and bands like that played, and it was a very exciting time to be involved in music. But it didn't last. I mean, these things tend to, like I said, go in waves, don't they?
Yeah.
And when it started to, I'll tell you one thing that it did affect us in a way. When Vice Squad signed to EMI, there was a certain element of the punk scene that really didn't like that. The fact that I was an independent label, and they saw one of my bands going to a major label, and the major label kept the name Riot City for those Vice Squad releases, because I didn't own the name Riot City. You see. Dave and Shane owned the name.
Yeah.
So they thought that I personally had taken my label and gone into EMI, which wasn't true at all.
Yeah.
And so I had a bit of flack for that from some of the more hardcore elements of punk, but nothing I couldn't ride.
So which were the other bands that sold really well for you, apart from Vice Squad?
Brace of Wheels did really well. And like I said, we did the first album on Riot City with them. They were a great band, but eventually they signed to another label. But we sold 12,000 of their albums,
that's
which was
great figures.
Which was great.
Yeah.
And it was a good album as well. And
So,
The Ejected did 2 albums with us as well.
I was looking at your website yesterday, preparing for today, and you actually had some sales figures. You sold a total of 154,000 7-inch singles, and you were doing that part-time.
Yeah.
It's a staggering figures, and 50,000 albums, and nearly 30,000 12-inch singles.
It's
you
madness,
sold
isn't
about
it?
250,000 records over 3 years.
It's madness.
It's a
isn't it?
hobby.
I know, it's madness.
Yeah.
But it just shows it can be done.
Yeah.
And I never ever. I sometimes look, when you're retrospective about these things, you kind of think, what would have happened if I'd have done that, and if I'd have given up the day job and come to work to London, because I was going to come and work in London at one time. But I don't know, something in there told me, no, stay where you are and keep it under control, and I did. And I never became a millionaire, but that doesn't bother me. I just enjoyed what I was doing, and I'm still a fan now. I still play those old records and think, I like that.
So what happened at the end? The sales started dwindling, did they? Was that why?
They did. sales did start to drop off. Bands started to wane. The wave had been ridden, and the second wave of punk was coming to an end, I guess. And so it's quite a difficult thing to know when to stop.
Because you're enjoying it so much.
Because you enjoy it so much. You press 5,000 albums, you only sell 3,000. You think, maybe this is the time to stop, because 2,000 albums is worth a lot of money. So financially, it tells you. But as being a fan, you want to keep going and keep putting it out. And to an extent, I did. I did more American bands with a later punk label. But Riot City, no, I think it sort of ran its course. But when I say ran its course, it's still alive and well today, in as much as the albums are still selling, the compilations of the singles are still selling, and it certainly hasn't gone away, and I don't think it ever will now.
The material is still available on Captain Eye and on Anagram Records and other labels as well.
What amazes me even more about it is that books have been written about it, and have been written about me and my input into punk music. And when you're doing it, when you're releasing all these records and there's 150,000, you're not aware of what you're doing in a way.
You're creating history.
But you're not aware of it. You're just doing it, and it's almost like a chore in a way. It's almost like an enjoyable chore that I've got to get that. I've got to get that ready for next week, and that many have got to go here, and that many have got to go there. But when you sit back and look back at what you've done, I'm bloody proud of what I've done. It's quite an achievement, I think, for one bloke. And I've never had any help. The only help I ever had was at the start of my Heartbeat Records career, shall we say. I had a partner who was with me for the first 2 singles, but then lost interest, and best thing we ever did was to part. We're still good friends, but we just didn't want to stay working together.
Okay. Well, thank you for coming in, Simon.
My pleasure. I've enjoyed talking.
Thank you for watching Cherry Red TV and meeting Simon Edwards, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you.
Goodbye.